World's most evil killers had tortured and murdered 33 young men during a 5 year period in 1970. 27 of the bodies were buried right beneath his own home in and around Chicago, Illinois. To me, is the essence of evil, remorseless, no-souled. He proved himself to be one of the world's most evil killers. He was well liked in the community he lived in and would often dress up as a clown for kids' parties. His name, John Wayne Gacy, the Killer Clown. Hello everyone, my name is Melissa. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Real People, True Crime. If you find my channel helpful, please subscribe and like. I do my true crimes once a week on a Tuesday. Let's get started. John Gacy's story started 40 years ago. He was born in Chicago, Illinois on the 17th of March, 1942. John had a difficult upbringing. His father was an alcoholic and mentally and physically abusive to his children and his parent and his mother. Apparently, all of John's childhood, his father demeaned him, called him all kinds of names, just treated him terrible. His father is a significant figure in the genocide of Gas's terrible deed. All alone, John was trying to satisfy his father, who he never could. John was a sickly child who suffered from a heart condition, limiting his involvement in sports activity and alienating him from his peers. Age 11, an accident in a playground led to back out and hospital visits. 1966, 24-year-old John Gacy was married and relocated his family to Waterloo, west of Chicago, Iowa. He had quite a good job, and his wife had 2 children, so they appeared to be the typical cereal box American family. John Gacy was quite active in his local chamber of commerce. He was in the political world. He owned his own business. He played quite an active role. He was a real figure in the local community. John Gacy built a perfect life for himself, but he was concealing a dark secret. He developed an unhealthy sexual interest in young boys. There was a son of a fellow JC member who he lured back to his home, and he sexually assaulted, and the kid revealed this to his father, and John was arrested. John Gacy hired another teenager to intimidate this kid, to lure this kid into some remote place and beat him up, and warn him against testifying in John Gacy case. Despite all the effort John Gacy did to this victim, the victim still testified. But there wasn't conclusive proof of an attack. Therefore, police were only able to charge him with sodomize of the 15-year-old boy. John pleaded guilty to 1 count of sodomize, thinking he would get a minimum sentence, but the judge threw the book at him, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, December 3rd, 1968. John was sentenced to Animal State Penitentiary. He was charged with sodomize. You can look below, read the comments. It'll have a description of what that is, what that word means. While in jail, John's wife divorced him. His father died, and he was denied permission to attend the funeral. John served barely 18 months of the 10 years of his sentence due to good behavior. He was a nice guy while in jail. Terrible. June 1917, now age 28, John Wayne Gacy was released from prison, and he returned home to Chicago. His friend and family were unaware of what has taken in Iowa. They didn't know none of his background. It was Iowa. John began his own business. None of his acquaintances was aware because no criminal background was needed because he owned his own business. He was a stand-up guy. In June 1972, John Gacy got married for a second time and set up home in the Chicago suburban at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue. A house would eventually become one of the most infamous addresses in America. 6 years later, in December of 1978, 10 miles from John's house, Rob Pace, a 15-year-old all-American good kid and student, was reported missing by his mother in the late 70s. There was a lot of stuff going on with the hippie movement around the 70s. There was a lot of runaways, homeless people. So if kids end up missing, that's what they do. It was the late 70s. Well, two detectives desperately needed to track down the contractor because this one kid, the 15-year-old, the mother wouldn't let it go. So two detectives desperately needed to track down the contractor. He was the last person to see Rob. Their search led to them to a 36-year-old man named John Wayne Gacy. John divorced his second wife 2 years previously and was running a successful business called PDM Contractor. John would often employ young men, one of whom was Tom Antonaka, who was 16-year-olds who wanted to get a job so he could afford a car. That's what all 16-year-olds want at this time. They just want to afford their car. Tony is still alive. He quoted his first impression of John Gacy was a likable guy, liked to joke around, appeared very normal, like a perfect boss. John Gacy would knock out early at 3 p.m. to have some fun and go partying with his young boys' employees. All he hired was young boys. But back in the 70s, nobody really paid that attention, as long as he got the job done. 15-year-old Rob Pace was looking for a job and was meeting with John, but hadn't been seen since meeting with John at the pharmacy where Rob worked. The detective Dave and Mike were investigating. They ran a record check on John Wayne Gacy, and it turned out he had a fairly lengthy background. He had spent some time in Iowa for sodomy, and it was sexual crime against children. The police obtained a warrant to search John Wayne Gacy home. December 13, 1978, police conduct their first search of John Gacy home, finding a number of suspicious items and recover various items, photographic and book titled Pretty Boys Must Die. They also recovered driver's license of other young boys, and those children were also reported missing. And they recovered a high school ring which had belonged to a missing 19-year-old John Speck, last seen in January 1977. So when they went to search his house the first time, they found all this evidence, but they didn't find any bodies. Further investigations discovered that two of John Gacy employees had been reported missing. 17-year-old John Bugvale, last seen July 1975. Gregory Gazella, also 17, missing in December of 1976. After their search warrant, the police were confident that there are at least 5 or 6 victims that weren't associated with John Gacy that haven't been seen, but with no evidence or bodies. The police could not make an arrest. OMG. All that evidence? Nothing? They didn't find any bodies. And you would think, since he was a contract, he probably got some great ideas of where to put the body. But it's the 70s. The police decided to surveillance John Gacy wherever he go, or we're going. But John Gacy knew the police were following him. He played games with the police by having a conversation with them. Hey, what up? John Gacy was very confident. He was a cocky and kept on bragging about his property and his blowing business. You know, because his business was doing such a good job. Even though he had all those evidence, the community didn't know about the evidence. And in the presence of the investigation police officer, he just didn't care. His neighbors, co-workers, all of his associates, the police talked to they loved John Wayne Gacy. Remember, he was the clown. He was the crazy clown that went to parties and made everybody laugh. This was after the warrant search of John Gacy property. All of this happened after the first warrant search of his properties. I don't understand how John Gacy was still popular and involved in political on weekend. He would dress as a clown, perform for children at parties and local hospital. We have to do better, people. We have to do better. At one point, John Gacy told detective, clowns. This is quoted by John. Clowns can get away with murder. But it took some time for those detectives to fully comprehend what here was a man who was capable of murder more than one. Michael and Dave and other detectives back at the station were trying. This is pretty crazy information. Mike and Dave and other detectives at the station were trying to get another warrant to search John Gacy's house. They received some disturbing news evidence. While questioning his colleagues, young kids, 17 and 18-year-old, to go down into his crawl space of his home to dig holes, he said he had a sewer issue. And they smelt a bad odor down there. That was just unbelievable. At West, remember that address, 8213 Summersdale Avenue. So the police were starting to believe, is it possible John Gacy could have buried someone in the crawl space? Mike and Dave continued to follow the popular contractor, but this time they had a plan to force John Gacy's hand by putting pressure on his core supporters, such as family and friends, neighbors who were surrounding John Wayne Gacy, because they noticed that he liked people around him. So they started telling the neighbors and everybody what was going on, what evidence they had. John Wayne Gacy contact his attorney, so it became hot. John Wayne Gacy contact his attorney in their office in the Park Ridge. Mike and Dave, the detectives, are outside, and they see the attorney waving to them to come inside the building. John Gacy's attorney was scared of him. So if they scared of him, he probably told them something, because he confessed to them at least 3 murders. So now that John Gacy don't have any friends, because the police detained that, they already told them what was going on, he by himself. Mike and Dave arrested John Gacy for marijuana possession and delivery. So they didn't even arrest John Gacy for murder yet. They only arrest him for marijuana possession and delivery. While in custody, he told the detective he was experiencing chest pains and was taken to a local hospital. But he was just trying to buy more time. The police had obtained a second warrant for his house. December the 24th, 1978, they searched John Gacy's home on West 8213 Summersdale Avenue. Remember that address? This is the second search. They went into the crawl space. This time, the very first shovel, they found human remains. That day, they charged John Wayne Gacy with murder. It's about time. John confessed to the detective to the murder and drew a map to the burial site beneath his home. His map was right on the money. A total of 27 bodies were discovered. Whoa, wow. The arrest came down, and that was the headline of the local news and the papers. Of course. This normal scene, this decent, regular, ordinary guy was living in a real-life horror house daily. The trench due death, and that there were the rotting body of 27 young men in that crawl space. He was just living there and then going to work the next day. John Wayne Gacy confessed to murdering 33 young boys between 1972 and 1978. He buried 27 young boys in this crawl space, buried one outside in his backyard because there wasn't no more space in his own property. He threw 5 remaining victims in a Des Plaines River. He preyed on these victims and knew they were homeless with no family members who's going to come and check on them. Shame on him. February 6, 1980, the trail of John Wayne Gacy began at Cook County Criminal Court building in Chicago. At this time, Illinois still had the death penalty. Yeah. John Gacy defended team pleading insanity. John Gacy defense team pleading insanity. During the 5-week trial, the prosecution proved that John Gacy was fully responsible for his crime. March 20th, 1980, the jury had made their decision guilty, and the judge sentenced John Wayne Gacy to death. Yeah, we need justice, which he remained in death row for 14 years. May 10th, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by legal injection at Stateville Penitentiary in Illinois. You know what John Wayne Gacy's last words was? Kiss my ass. He felt no remorse for any of his victims. True crime, real story, John Wayne Gacy. Have a good day. Bye-bye, and be safe and make better choices.